Good morning, everybody, and welcome out to the Infusionsoft Mastermind Call. My name is Scott Richens. I'm the manager of the live events team here at Infusionsoft, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today as we are going to be talking about lead source tracking. Now, the first thing I like to do before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything here, I like to make sure that the audio is coming through loud and clear and that my screen is on, that y'all can see stuff. So why don't you go ahead, give me a shout out if everything's coming through great. Let me know where you're joining us from. We have plenty of people here on the call. Looks like we still have some more logging in, but give me a shout out. Let me know where you're joining us from. Let me know where in the world you're at with us. Looks like we got a number of folks chiming in here. Vladimir, good to see you on here again. Vladimir here. I believe you're here with us every week. Vladimir, thanks for being on here. We got Jason joining us from Los Angeles. Kenda joining us from London. Bonnie over in Southern California. We got Central Virginia, San Diego. We got Wes. Wes is always a comedian here with us. So let's see. Seth joined us from Pennsylvania. Graham over in Massachusetts. Awesome. We got plenty of folks joining us here, and it looks like we still have some others coming on the call. So I'm excited to be here with you today. You know, it's funny. I open up many of my presentations saying this is one of my favorite things to teach. So you probably start to not believe me, but that's because we just have so many gosh dang cool things to talk about here with Infusionsoft and how to impact your business. I'm fortunate to say that I love my job. So today, what we're going to be going through is what we're going to go through here. Let me flip on my presentation. Is the understanding marketing ROI with lead source tracking. I just got somebody. Oh, there we go, Jason. Thanks for letting me know there. Understanding your marketing ROI with lead source tracking. This was one that was posted in the mastermind area where you guys can submit some topics and some questions and things that you want to cover. And we'll get to that here in just a moment. There are a couple things that I want to cover here as we're getting started, a couple announcements I want to make sure that we make as we get going. Number one is Infusionsoft University. We have a couple more sessions coming up here before the end of the year that I want to make sure that you guys know about. We have one here in Chandler, Arizona, November 19th through 22nd, one in Orlando in December the 10th through 13th. And what the university is it's a 4-day intensive training program that we've got for you. We've got about 60 or 80 people in the room together. It's a group training environment where we teach you Infusionsoft from the ground up. We've got the first couple days are focused on basic. The second couple days are focused on advanced training. And really, we just teach you how to use Infusionsoft. We get you some activities that are hands-on, and it's a really powerful group training environment where we just walk you through the strategy and the tactics and the software and how to achieve the results that you're looking for in Infusionsoft. So if that's something that you're looking for, I invite you to check out more information at infusionsoft.com/university. The other thing that I had just mentioned a little bit earlier is where y'all can go in and submit topics that you're interested in hearing about. So you can do that at mastermindwebinars.uservoice.com. I include a link to that in the email announcements that I send out to you every week. You'll also find a link to this at the mastermind page on our help center. And what you're able to do is just post up topics that are of interest to you, and then the community can vote those up, and we will then talk about those at some point in the future when those bubble up towards the top. So if you want to be involved in what it is that we're talking about here and what it is that we're teaching, that's where your voice can be heard, and I invite you to check it out. So again, today's topic that we're going to be covering is understanding your marketing ROI with lead source tracking in Infusionsoft. This is something that we released about 1.5 years ago, and a lot of times today still doesn't get a whole bunch of attention. So I want to shine a big, bright spotlight on that here today as we're going through and help you understand how you can make smarter decisions, okay? One of the questions that I ask often is, what is your ROI? And I want you to think about that. Can you tell me, what is your ROI on different marketing activities? What is your return on investment on your different marketing activities? Another way to start looking at this is, if you had $100, where would you invest it? Where should you invest your next $100 based on data that you have, not based on, sticking your finger in the air and seeing which way the wind is blowing and taking your best educated guess. No, my mantra that I always use is don't argue with reality, seek to understand it. What is the data telling you? What are the numbers telling you? What's working? Do you know that? That becomes the question. Okay. So I want to walk through a little example here with you. As I was a consultant here prior to being on the events team here, I was a consultant working one-on-one with customers, and I had one of the customers that jumped on a call with me. The very first call that we had was a strategy session to define what his goals were with Infusionsoft. And I said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" He said, "Well, I want to increase my opt-ins." So we went back and we started talking about where were people coming to his page from. His homepage was where he had an opt-in form, and he had a number of different forums where he was paying for advertisement. So he had banner advertisements on these different pages, and so we started talking through that. And he said, "Yeah, I'm really excited. I've got some really good sources." And he said the first forum that he was working with gave him about 1,000 leads a month, 1,000 click-throughs a month. And we kept going through and talking about some of the other forums and banner advertisement platforms that he was using, and they progressively decreased. So his biggest one, the one he was most excited about, had 1,000 click-throughs a month that he was getting. Another one had about 500. Another one had about 100. And then, I kept pulling some information out of him, and I said, "Okay, and anything else? What else you got?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got this one other one that sends me about 50 click-throughs a month." I said, "Okay, cool. Good to know." Now, then I asked the question, how many people are actually opting in? He said, "Well, about 50 people are." So I stepped back. I said, "Okay, well, do you know where those 50 are coming from? Can you tell me where those 50 are coming from? Those 50 people that are opting in, which of those 4 forums that we just talked about are the ones that they're actually opting in?" He just kind of, I could hear him over the phone, like shrug his shoulders, like, "Well, how do I know that? I can't know that." And I said, "Well, let me paint a picture for you." And I went to the extremes. I said, what if that last forum that you just talked to me about, those 50 people that were sent were the 50 people that opted in, and the one that you're telling me is your best source, the one that's sending you 1,000, actually doesn't have anybody opt in?" And there was like this silence on the other side. Just this moment of clarity of how important tracking your lead sources is, how important tracking where it is that people are coming from, so that we understand which levers to pull. We understand where to invest our money because we know what kind of return we're going to get from it. And so that's what I want to talk about today. That's why it's so important to understand our lead sources. As I was talking with this gentleman, we suddenly had that moment of clarity that best for him didn't necessarily mean most. It didn't mean the biggest number. That just means that's where perhaps his biggest expense was. But that didn't mean that's where the return was coming, what was turning into customers, what was turning into people that converted and opted in and signed up and became customers down the road. That's where our lead sources become so important. We want to know what levers we can pull, where we would invest that next $100 to do the most good, to leverage that the most in our business. So let's start talking about lead sources, okay? Lead sources is the key to this type of information, to understanding our return on investment. Where are we investing? We need to be able to track that kind of information. So the first thing that I want to make sure that we're specifying, especially in terms of Infusionsoft and online marketing, you offline people that are doing things outside of the internet and maybe doing some print advertising and otherwise, we'll get to you as well. Stick with me. In the online world, though, we're going to talk about lead sources. Very specifically, we're going to call lead sources the referring URL. We're going to call lead sources where people came from. This is what Infusionsoft does by default. In Infusionsoft, we have something called Infusionsoft Web Analytics. And these web analytics are automatically included in all of your JavaScript web forms, on all of your hosted landing pages, on all of your shopping carts and otherwise. This web analytics begins to track a lot of information about your prospects, one of which is the referring URL. Where did they come from to get to my website? So what I want to do, I want to shift into Infusionsoft at this point, and we're going to be in the software from here on out as I build and demonstrate to you what we can do here. Now, from the web analytics perspective, what you'll need to do is go here within marketing lead generation. And there's this web tracking portion, one of which says web analytics. We're going to click through on that one. And if it takes you here to this search, we'll just click search. Here's what we want to get to. This tracking code right here. Paste this tracking code on your site. Now, for this web analytics to begin functioning, we need to install this script on our site. It's like Google Analytics. If you use Google Analytics, I encourage you to continue to do so. I'm going to encourage you to also use Infusionsoft Analytics. Just place this script on your site, wherever that might be. If you have a WordPress site, I would encourage you to check out a WordPress plugin called Infusionsoft Analytics for WordPress. It was put together by Jordan Hatch, and that will actually install this on all of your pages on WordPress very easily. If you have any other sort of content management system, just get this, give it to your web developer or do it yourself, place it in the footer of your theme file. Okay, so this right here, this code is the key to tracking our lead sources on your website so that we have this information moving forward. Now, I will also recommend to you, if you are doing web analytics, this information is really important to you. I'm going to recommend that when you post your web forms on your website, I'm going to recommend that you use the HTML versions of it, not the JavaScript versions. That causes a little bit of complications when it comes to this analytics side of things. So the best way to get the best results on this stuff is to place this code on your site and to also use HTML versions of your web forms. Now, what this begins to do for us is, like I said, it will track our lead sources. And as we defined here a moment ago, our lead sources are the referring URL. Okay, so within these lead sources, what we're now able to do, let's click on lead generation up top, and let's start to talk about our lead sources. I can edit and view lead sources that already exist or create some. I'm going to start with looking at what we already have. Under edit and view lead sources, you'll notice that I have a number of different lead sources within here. Okay, I've got 31 so far. Many of these have been automatically generated. Now, what that web analytics code does that we just spoke about, anytime somebody hits your site, it's going to track where they came from. It's going to track that referring URL. In fact, what it's going to do first is it's going to create for us what's called this visitor record. Okay, let me hit search here. And it will then take me in to see all of my visitors. This is before anybody ever opts in. So when somebody first hits my site, they're a visitor. We don't yet know who they are. They haven't opted in. I don't have a name or an email or any other information to follow up with them on. But we know that they exist and we know that they're on our site. So these visitor records now begin to track people before they ever opt in. Now, that tracking includes a lot of information about their device, what kind of browsers they're on, operating system, and all of that. It also begins to track from the very moment, the first time that they hit one of your web properties that has this web analytics installed on it, from that very first point that they have contact with you, we're now tracking their lead source. Okay, we've got a number of different lead sources within here, different areas that I've tested this out, different websites where I've got forms and analytics. And you'll notice that before they ever opt in, I know where they came from. So that's the key thing to understand about lead source tracking in Infusionsoft, is it is tracking the point of first contact. Where did they first hear about you? And what's beautiful about this is now once somebody opts in, they opt in on that same machine where they were searching your information. A little bit later, they then opt in, or maybe a couple days or a couple weeks later, they come back to your site and they opt in for some information. We know who they are because we knew who they were as a visitor. We know what their lead source was. All of that rolls in automatically into their contact record, and we know what that point was that they first engaged with you. So that's the beauty of having this web analytics. That's the power that it now gives us to understand the impact and the effectiveness of our lead sources. Now, with that information, understanding now that we are tracking where people came from the first time that they hit our sites, now we're able to start looking at lead sources. And as we look at these lead sources, what we now have is those referring URLs, where people hit our site from, where they came from that first time they visited us. Am I doing some online advertising? Am I being featured in some other blog posts? Am I out doing some different activities, involved in some different online communities and posting up about my business? Are people coming to my site from there? And I can begin to track where people are coming from. Now, there's a few things that are important on this. If I want to take a look at, some different items that I might have within here, Grow Social. This was one I was setting up on some Grow Social pages there. Let's see, what else do I have in here? Twitter, Hootsuite, Facebook, some others on this one. Okay, if I'm doing any sort of paid advertising, I've got one down here for online pay-per-click. If I'm doing any sort of paid advertising, like in my example in the beginning, what we can begin to do is track our expenses. Now, that's the first part of talking about our ROI, our return on investment of our ad spends here. If we're paying for online advertising, we have to track our expenses. And what we can do is now come in here, click Add Expense. Is it a one-time expense or is it a monthly recurring expense? And I can choose what are my start dates and end dates. Okay, so if I'm doing online pay-per-click, I'm going to come in here once a month and I'm going to say, here's what my spend was for the previous month. Okay, and I'll put in the title and the amounts. Okay, PPC right here, amount. Let's say I had $100 on this one. Save, and that will now add that right here along with the date that it was incurred. So this is how we can begin to specify, track what is our expenses related to these particular lead sources. Now, with that being done, okay, I can go back here. Actually, I'll point out a couple other things on here. On this general tab, we've got name and description. We can also start to look at some different categories, vendors, mediums, message, and content. So if that's important to you to begin tracking all of that information, what are the different categories? Is this direct, email, organic, paid? In this case, this one would be paid. Who's the vendor? All of these different sets of information become searchable for you and filterable when you're pulling your searches. So that's that additional information there that's helpful for you. Once I've set all of that up, this is my lead sources. Now I've got within here those expenses and otherwise. So this is the first half. This is just our expense portion. This is the lead source. This is where people are coming from. Okay. Now, let's start looking at the actual data surrounding this. This is just my list of lead sources. The actual data around this is going to be right here in our return on investment. This return on investment portion, if I click on Buy Lead Source and search, is going to give me a lot of great information. Notice right here, lead source ROI. Now it's showing me my lead sources along with a lot of information. The first thing I've got right here is category. Okay, within category, this is where I can begin to roll things up into more summaries of my different lead sources. If you're doing a lot of paid or a lot of social or a lot of organic and you want to be able to track all of that, you can track that at a high level via these categories. That's another search that we have right here, lead source category. I'm going to look at the very granular one right here. Okay. Now, this report now has a ton of information baked into it. You can look at your expenses and revenue right here. Expenses are those expenses like we just set up. So I just placed $100 within this one. I already had another 100 on there. So I have $200 in expenses on this particular one. Now notice here where it has revenue. Revenue is showing me here that I've got 10,000 in sales on this particular one. Now, where does this revenue come from? This revenue, if I want to be able to track my ROI and my revenue, I need to have all of my transactions go through Infusionsoft. Doesn't mean people have to buy online. They could buy over the phone. You could log these in manually. But the transactions have to be in Infusionsoft. It's an all-in-one platform, and it makes it super easy to do that kind of stuff. If you don't log your orders and transactions through Infusionsoft, there's still a ton of information that you can get from this report. So stick with me here. But if you want your built-in ROI like we have right here from prospect and your advertising and expenses in advertising all the way to the actual sale and the revenues generated by those sales, then all of that needs to be logged within Infusionsoft. Now, as we continue to move to the right, the information that we have here is extremely valuable to you whether or not you sell through Infusionsoft. The first thing that we get to see is visitors. What is the number of visitors that I have had come to my site that has each of these different lead sources? How many visitors have I generated? How many eyeballs have hit that page? How many unique eyeballs? This is visitors. This is not total number of page views. This is visitors. Because if the same person visits my page, my site, multiple times from the same machine, then they're the same visitor. We know that. So we can start to see how many visitors are each one of my lead sources generating. The next one we start to look at is cost per visitor. How expensive is it for each of these sets of eyeballs that I'm getting to my site? As we continue to move across, now we're moving to the next threshold. Visitors, people that just hit my site. Contacts is people that actually opt in and engage with me at a further level. How many contacts do I have hit my site? What is my cost per contact? And what is my visitor to contact ratio? Now, if we rewind all the way back to the beginning with my example of the different forums, driving to the homepage, this right here would have been a phenomenal number for him. This cost per contact would have been a great number for him. All he knew was visitors, but visitors weren't getting him any further. So he's looking at his cost per contact. Well, he should be looking at his cost per contact if he just wants to get people there to opt in, and then he can follow up. If you've got a great follow-up system in place that you know you can convert, great. How do you get more people there to your site? Now, again, that's just the next step. Visitors, cost per contact, and even better is when we can get all the way over here to the customers column. Now, again, this customers column, all of this customer information is based on somebody actually being in your Infusionsoft application and they have a transaction associated with their contact record. They've made a purchase through Infusionsoft with you. That's how somebody is identified as a customer. So if you don't run transactions through Infusionsoft, these three columns won't be as valuable for you because you don't have the data within there for it to calculate. Okay, so as an awareness on that one, something to expect. But the information right here, as far as customers versus cost per contact and contact to customer ratio, is now giving us some great information here to understand what does it cost to bring on each new customer from this particular lead source, from a particular lead source that we have within here. Okay, and then that contact to customer ratio, how many of my contacts become customers? Now, there's a few things that I want to show to you guys here. Okay, some of the numbers on here look a little bit goofy, and I want to make sure to help you all understand that. The way that this is supposed to work and the way that it does work, I'll explain the deviations here in a moment. The way that it does work, all of our visitors are also considered contacts, or sorry, all of our contacts are also considered visitors. Okay, so people that exist as contacts will also count in the visitor number here. So each of these should get successively smaller. So notice right here, 232, 3, and 0, 258, 143, and 5. Some of these other ones in here where I have a 0 and a 1 and a 1, that's because I've gone through and I've done some modifications to some of my data. Law of small numbers on this one. I don't have this active on a live site, so these are more or less just some test numbers within here. So any deviations that you see from there is just because I'm dealing with the law of small numbers, and I've got myself in there as a contact record. From the same machine, I've got like 20 different contact records. So that skews a little bit of the data. But if you look right down here where I've got some of this different information, 232, 3 and 0, 258, 150, 143, and 5. That's more typically what things would begin to look at. They'll progressively get smaller along the way. So this right here becomes a phenomenal dashboard for you for having a ton of information based on your lead sources, what's working and what's not. Now, I want to start getting into a few additional things here. This is all automatic. Everything that we're talking about here is automatic. Our lead sources are automatically assigned. Let's say somebody picks up a little bit of information about your business, is really impressed with it, writes a blog post to you, writes a blog post about you, and then you get a bunch more traffic from that. Well, guess what? That lead source will automatically pop up here so that you see that information. Again, that would be some great organic traffic. You aren't paying for it, so your expenses are very low. You can then see what the conversion ratio is there. Heck, you could reach out to that person, send them a nice thank you or otherwise. All these lead sources are automatically created whenever somebody comes from a new page. It's just happening for you. Okay? Now, many times there are folks out there that are wanting to do some additional things, though. They're wanting to do a lot of online advertising and perhaps track specific ads that they're using, or they want to do some offline advertising, and they want to now track the offline advertising, those lead sources. If I'm publishing something, an ad in a magazine or a periodical or otherwise, great. How do I track that information? Because I don't know anything about those people that come from offline to online. That looks like a direct hit. So how do we begin to deal with some of that information? Well, let's talk through that, okay? Now, each of these lead sources within here, these are the ones that are already created. But if I go back, let me close out a couple windows here. If I go back here to my marketing lead generation portion, I can also create lead sources. I can manually create lead sources. And for example, I will show you one here. I've got one. Some of you have been in a number of my sessions. You may know that I attended college for engineering, kind of a nerd. Popular Science Advertisement was the first magazine that came to mind when I was doing this one. So I've got a Popular Science Advertisement. Let's say we were doing some sort of advertisement in a magazine or otherwise, something offline that was going to generate brand new leads. I want to be able to track that information. Well, what I can do here is manually create my lead source. I can manually create that lead source here, and notice Popular Science Advertisement, category, vendor, all this stuff. I can place that information within here. I can also then associate my expenses. Now, let's go develop a landing page. If I'm doing something offline and I'm sending somebody online, I want to be able to track that they came from that particular advertisement. This might be in print. It might be on radio or television. If you're doing anything like that, maybe you sponsor a podcast and you want to send people over to yourdomain.com/radio or podcast, whatever it might be, so that now you can track where those people came from. You hear this all the time if you listen to the radio. I listen to talk radio sometimes, and they'll always do 1-800-Flowers/radio or / whoever the host is of your show. You just search for that, and then they know where you came from. So now what we can do within here, once we create this lead source, that lead source now exists for me. Check this out. Let's go into the campaign builder. All roads lead to the campaign builder. So we'll get back in there right now, add a campaign. And this is going to be my mastermind lead source demo here. I'm going to click save. Now, if I'm creating a landing page, I'm going to pull out one of these goals. And let's say that this is my Popular Science advertisement. Great. Okay. And I want that to be a landing page. It can be a landing page or a web form. Either one works. In the greater scheme of things, if I'm doing something offline and I'm driving somebody online, I'm going to create a landing page that is specifically geared for those people. So in that landing page, wonderful. Gotta love having live demos sometimes. Let me try something here real quick. Give me one moment. It does not happen often. Let me try this here one more time. Okay. I will have to work with my developers. The nice thing is, anytime that happens, I have for them a recording of it. So, all right. Mastermind, take two. All right. Try this one more time here. And we will make this a landing page. Well, that could be a little bit difficult here. I apologize for that. I will work with our team to see what's going on. Let me see if I can make that work as a web form, because a web form will work as well. Okay, so it may be something there with landing pages. I will follow up on that once I'm done with this session. So here's what we got. The key is, again, landing pages include a web form, so this is essentially the same thing without designing a whole page around it. The key is this. If I'm sending people to a page that has this web form on it, here's what's going on. They're going to fill out their information, first name, email, and otherwise. By default, that website analytics is going to track the fact that they hit directly on your site. It doesn't have a referring URL. Therefore, there is no associated lead source. Well, there isn't the lead source that we want there to be. Let me be clear. There isn't the lead source that we want there to be. It will just show that they directly hit your site. So if I had people go to scottrichens.com/radio, that's what it would show. That domain is scottrichens.com is the lead source. I want it to be something different though. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull in a field snippet here called hidden. This hidden field snippet, I can search for lead source. And this lead source that I'm going to use is going to be the one that is my popular science advertisement. Now, what's going to happen on this is whenever somebody fills out this particular form, it's going to override that default lead source of my domain. And it's going to override that and say, no, this was actually somebody that came from this popular science advertisement. We can track that this contact came from this offline advertisement. So now you can begin to track that kind of information. Okay. Now, what we can also do here, let's go like this. Let me mark this as ready. Go back to campaign. I want to show you something. We're going to go techie here. Okay. I'm going to get into some code. I want you to understand what's happening. Okay. If I publish this one and then I open it back up, I'm going to click on code, use the hosted version. Okay. I'm going to go check this one out. Here's what I want you to see. Okay. All we see is the first name and email, but what's happening in the background, I'm going to use Firebug here, pretty handy tool. What happens in the background, I'm going to click right here and say lead source. Oh, check this out. Input ID. Lead source ID type is hidden. It's a hidden field and it has the value of 27. It's preloaded with a value of 27. Why 27? Because 27 is my popular science advertisement. It's the lead source ID that represents my popular science advertisement. So when this form now gets submitted, that contact record is created. It will override the lead source on that contact record, and it will say that they came from this popular science advertisement. Now, let me show you where those lead sources are at on a contact record. If I pull up a contact record here, I'll just pull up one of mine real quick. Let me get rid of this. There we go. If I pull up one of my contact records, lead sources show up right here. So if you do ever need to come in and change a lead source, you can. I recommend that you don't. Be very judicious. Keep your lead sources being that point of first contact, that point where somebody first heard about you. Okay. But notice right here, we've got lead source, online, pay-per-click. There's even a little bit of information, how your contact was attracted into your list, where they first heard about you, where they first accessed your website or otherwise. So that's where our lead source now shows up. Now, when somebody fills out this particular form, that lead source is now set to be the hard-coded one that we wanted as opposed to a variable. So what I taught you in the very beginning is lead sources will automatically be generated. That's fantastic. You don't have to think about it now in certain cases where I'm doing offline advertisements or other types of advertisements where I'm only sending people from a particular ad to this page. Then I can simply hard-code it the way I just did. Let's go back to the campaign builder. Take one more look at that. We pulled in a hidden field, set it as the lead source, and we populated the field value. We just wrote popular science advertisement. We knew in the background that needed to be 27 for lead source. Now, that's great. And as I teach this, I oftentimes get people at this point that say, Scott, that's fantastic, but I'm doing a lot. I send a lot of people to the same landing page. Okay. Maybe I send out different versions of a postcard. I want to see which ones, people respond from or otherwise, or, whatever it might be. I send a lot of people to the same page. I just realized that was a bad example. That's not the one that I'd want to do. But I send a lot of different advertisements to the same page. I want to be able to track that. Okay. Now, let's check this out. What if instead of pre-populating this, I just put a hidden field on there? I just put a hidden field on there. It's like a container, but it's an empty container now. I hit save. Okay. I know that I want to override. I want to set that lead source ID, but it's going to be a variable based on where they came from. Okay. Let's go back to an online ad or a radio ad. If I've got a couple different versions, then I'm sending people back to that one. Then I can give them slightly different URLs. Let's say I'm doing different print advertisements and I got a QR code and I want to know which magazine they came from. I want to know if you came from Popular Science or if you came from, some other magazine. Which magazine did you come from? Maybe I have the same ad. Maybe I have the same text in them, but you come from somewhere different. You're a different lead source, but I'm going to send you to the same page. Well, how do we do that? Well, we leave a hidden lead source ID, hidden lead source field here. Let me republish with this because now this is updated. Remember a moment ago on that actual form, that lead source was pre-populated as 27. But now if I refresh here, let's go take a look at it again. I deleted that information. Notice now my value is blank. Okay. Now here's where we get a little ninja on you. What you can do is you can actually pass a lead source to this value right here. So if I'm having 4 or 5 different postcards where I'm sending somebody to the same page, if I'm doing 4 or 5 different magazine ads in different magazines, maybe on different pages on the magazine, I want to track that. Great. I can still send them all to the same page, but I can track which particular ad they came from, and I can do that by creating a unique lead source for each one of them. Okay, whoops, let me go right here. What we do is we send them to a particular page, and at the end of that, we throw in a question mark here. And that question mark now allows us to pass variable information. We want to pass this ID, lead source ID. Keep in mind that capitals matter, capital L, capital S, capital I. I just copied it from the code. Lead source ID equals, and if this were my Popular Science advertisement, and I wanted to track that they came from Popular Science, well, let me go back here. Remember, let me close this script panel down at the bottom. Remember, our lead sources have these IDs. And I can take 27 right here, lead source ID 27, and I can simply place it right here in the URL. Lead source ID equals 27. We now go take a look right here, inspect element with Firebug. Lead source now equals 27. What this allows us to do is now send people from multiple different advertisements to the same landing page, but we know where they came from. We know which advertisement they came to us from. And now we can track all of those independently. Now, that's what we've got set up here. That's how all of this stuff begins to work inside of Infusionsoft. And this is great when you're wanting to track everything that's coming to your website and track things that are offline. You're trying to keep a handle on all of that. I've had a couple people that come up to me and they're very heavily involved in online pay-per-click advertising or otherwise, or keyword search optimization, all kinds of stuff online. They're very heavily involved in that, and that is a primary source of their business. And now we start talking about like things like campaigns and mediums and a lot of other information like that. And when you get to that level of complexity, there's a few additional tools that I'm going to recommend that you check out. It's actually one or the other that you can check out. Okay. If you go to the marketplace, go to marketplace.infusionsoft.com. You can search for lead source in there. There's one in there called iTracker 360. which does really well. They've got a free version in there that you can check out. It helps you go through, track that kind of information. You're able to track a lot of your campaign information. I signed up for a free trial the other day. They do have a free version that you can check out that will help you begin tracking all of that information, passing it along to Infusionsoft. They've got a paid version that has some extra features and such from reporting and tagging and other things and cleaning up your lead sources for you. So that's one version out there. Another one where I think this that preceded this one, it's a free version, but it doesn't do nearly as much as if you go to tylergarnes.com/LS. Tyler Garnes used to be the VP of marketing here at Infusionsoft, and he actually built this script that he gives away right here. And we use that at Infusionsoft for a long time. Heck, we may even still use it. I don't know. But this will basically piggyback off of Google cookies and keywords there and pass information over to Infusionsoft as well. It helps you auto-generate lead sources based on your different campaigns and mediums and otherwise and messages in your URL string. So your UTM, all of that information, you can now have that automatically used to create your lead sources in Infusionsoft. So I've talked to Tyler on his. Again, his is free. He doesn't have support there necessarily like iTracker. If you need some help installing things, you may not want to use Tyler's there. But if you're pretty techie, you understand some stuff, great, check that out. He told me the only reason he asks you to update, first name and email. He used to have this as a free page, but sometimes Infusionsoft, we make changes to the platform. And so the scripts need to be updated, and Tyler does a pretty good job to keeping those updated. iTracker, they keep those updated as well. So you'll just want to make sure that you're on one list or the other to receive updates from them when they need to push out some updates to your scripting so things continue to work. So both of those will do a great job for you to now help you really track really in-depth advertising that you may be doing online, Facebook, Google, Bing. I did just say Bing. I don't know who uses that, but that might be a great source for some of you. We just talk about Google and Facebook so much these days. So anyways, you can track all of those different online avenues that you may leverage for sending traffic your way, for getting traffic from pay-per-click and otherwise. So that's really what I wanted to cover here today as we are diving into ROI tracking. Is we've got to be able to capture this information. And the website analytics that we now have from Infusionsoft does a lot of that for you. It does a lot of that for you through just that tracking code. And it's tracking people not just when they opt into a web form, but it's beginning to track that information from before they ever opt in, from the time that they very first hit your site. We've got an eye on them. We're watching them wander around your site. We can see page views and such, but we know how they first got to your site. We can begin to track that information. And with that information, then we walk them through to the point where hopefully they opt in. That lead source can roll right over, and we can now track that lead source still as they're a contact, knowing how they first heard from us. And when they go through to purchase, now we track that back to the lead source. And in our lead source, if we go to lead generation, return on investment by lead source, now we have the information in here to tell us what lead sources are giving us our best ROI. That takes us all the way back to the question that I started with in the beginning. Where are you going to spend your next $100? If you've got to make that decision, you're leveraging your resources, and your resources in this case is your money that you're going to spend on advertising. What's working for you? What is the most sure bet? What's going to get you the most return? This report right here, when you've set things up properly in Infusionsoft, as I've walked you through here today, this report becomes your best friend. It helps you follow that mantra that I use and I say all the time: don't argue with reality, seek to understand it. Don't argue with it. Let the numbers tell you what you need, where you should go, where you should focus your efforts. And that's my hope for you guys as you're out working. You guys are working hard. Let's also help you work smart. And you can do that here, just reading the numbers and understand that. So that's what I've got here for today. So what I want you to do, go ahead and give me some feedback here. I love to get some feedback from you on how would you rate the content here on today's call. I'm going to shift over into Q&A. I've seen some questions coming through. So I will go through those questions. Got some good questions in here. I'll start up on those questions here in just a moment. Go ahead and give me some feedback. Let me know how we're doing here. Hey, looks Casey, good to see you on here. Looks like we got Casey on here. I had dropped Casey an email. He is the guy behind iTracker 360 there that I had mentioned earlier, and really was impressed by his product there. So, all right, let's see. Close poll. I will close that in about 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of these, some of the questions that we've got here. Dave was asking, can we track conversions after tracking lead source, for example, opt-ins on your site? Dave, where lead source tracking comes into play, it's really looking at where did people come to your site from. So we're tracking that information from the moment they hit your site or from the moment that you assign that lead source ID, from an offline type thing. It's not now tracking where they opted in. You'll look at that through either some tags or some web form reports and otherwise. David, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's see. And then Dave, again, back to your question there about 1 contact versus 0 visitors. Hopefully I was able to explain that earlier. Chase said, a ton of my lead sources are simply my Infusionsoft app URL. Chase, here's what's going on that one. Earlier in the call, I made a recommendation to you. That recommendation was to use the HTML version of a web form. If I go right here, edit, click right through on this one, click on code, you can use JavaScript, HTML, or HTML code unstyled. The JavaScript is fantastically simple when you're just trying to put a web form on your site. However, it does introduce some complications when you want to really get some solid analytics through the Infusionsoft Web Analytics, and here's why. All the JavaScript is doing is it's creating what's called an iframe on your site. An iframe is like a window to another web page, which means that it's now one step removed. Okay, it means people are not opting in directly on like your home page or whatever page the web form's on. They're opting in on a page that's actually hosted by Infusionsoft but is showing through on your website. So it skews with your analytics there, Chase. What you're going to want to do, my recommendation is that you use the HTML code or the HTML code unstyled. That skewing of the analytics is just the nature of the fact that it's an iframe. There's no way around that I've been able to find at this point. That's the nature of how the iframes work on it and how it loads on your site. So that's why my recommendation when you're having, and let me be really clear on this, when you have organic traffic or paid traffic that you want to be able to track, you'll want to use the HTML code unstyled, okay? The only time I recommend using the JavaScript is when you are going to hard code your lead source like I did here. That's the only time that I recommend that you use it because we know where these people came from. I would not put this JavaScript thing out on my website. People can navigate to it, make it super easy to find. No, the only way people are going to get to this page is if they came from that offline advertisement. Okay, so that's what you're going to want to look at. You'll use the JavaScript when you're controlling how they get there because the JavaScript one will allow this to pre-populate. If I do this kind of code with the HTML version of the web form, it won't pre-populate it. So I do want to use the JavaScript when I'm passing variables, but I'm not going to pass variables to something on like my regular homepage. I want to be able to track that if I'm sending traffic directly to my homepage. I want to track that based on where they came from. Okay. So let's see here. Can you go over the hard coding and lead source again? Again, yeah, where that comes into play is just on the web form. You drag in the field snippet of hidden, and it's the lead source option. Okay, you choose which field, lead source field. If I'm only sending people here from one advertisement, like my popular science advertisement, I just type it in there and select, and we're all set. If I'm sending people here from multiple from multiple different advertisements to the same page, then I don't want to hard code this as one advertisement. I want to be able to pass the information from multiple advertisements, but know which one that they came from. So the first thing you would do is manually set up all of those different lead sources. And each of those different lead sources will have a lead source ID, which we get from here. Lead gen, edit view lead sources, ID right there. Okay, the one for my popular science one is 27. So if I wanted to be able to now pass that ID to track that information, the lead sources from multiple different advertisements, but everybody's opting in on the same page, on my web form, I'm going to leave that value blank. And when I send people to the URL that I'm going to use, or that I'm going to use as a QR code in my offline advertisement, or I'm going to do a redirect, whatever it's going to be something that redirects to a URL that includes this kind of code here on the end. It's got a question mark, capital L lead, capital S source, capital I ID equals, and then that 27, or it could be 43, or it could be 50, 59, whatever it might be, whatever the lead source ID is that I want to associate it with. And then it will pre-populate that hidden field. Okay, let's see. What else do I got? Mark just started a Google pay-per-click campaign. According to Google, I had 6 clicks. And visitors, I'm showing about 15 Google pay-per-click visits. Why the difference? Mark, I'm not 100% certain on that. We'd have to take a look at it to see each of those different folks in there. We just have to go take a look at it. Chase was asking, how do you edit vendor and medium? Let's see, Casey, you're still on the call here. Casey, how does vendor and medium work with you as well on your tool? Do you pass that? I thought I remembered seeing that you pass vendor and medium into the lead source as well. Can you give me some clarity there if you're still with us? How do you edit vendor and medium? If we're within there creating one of these, for example, what you can do is you can just type in a vendor. You can just type in a medium and hit save. And what that will then do is it will add it to your vendor dropdown. So you just type one here and type one here. I believe if you're using iTracker 360, I believe that will pass some information over here. Casey, let's see. Okay, great. You can't set it with the new drag and drop web forms. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so if you need to set that information, you can just come in here and configure that. Bill, I need to double check on that one. Bill was asking if a existing contact fills out a form with a hard-coded lead source, will their original lead source be overwritten? Here's my understanding on that one, Bill. My understanding that I need to clarify on this, I've clarified it before. If I hard-code one, it will overwrite the automatically assigned one. So, for example, the web analytics tracks you as coming from a particular place, but you fill out a form, it will overwrite the automatically assigned one that the web analytics had applied. Now, if somebody that's already filled out a form and has a lead source fills out another form with a hard-coded lead source, will that one overwrite? I don't know if it does. I haven't checked that particular scenario, and here's why I look at that. I don't hard code lead sources on web forms unless the only way people can get there is through some sort of offline or very specific advertisement. There shouldn't be any way for them to get there by doing a Google search. I'm going to shut that off in my from Google search. I'm not going to link to it from my homepage. The only way people are going to get to my landing page with a hard-coded lead source is because I sent them there. I wanted them to go there from a particular advertisement. So I'll check into that one, Bill, but that's why I don't know that particular answer. Is I just don't create that situation. Let's see. Cheryl, yeah, great question. Cheryl was asking for some clarification there on the JavaScript versus HTML, and I think I clarified that. Let's see here. Danny, good question on that one. What's the best place to go with questions on previous mastermind webinars? I don't know that there's anywhere else to go except to me on that one. However, I really answer most of the questions for those here on the calls. So I don't have a lot of bandwidth to answer the old ones. Tech support may be able to help on some of that stuff, but I don't have really a go-to person for that, Danny. Okay. Farley was asking for some clarification here, and it looks like that question popped up a couple times. So let me clarify. So what I was demonstrating here when I said lead source 27, I had some folks saying, wait, okay, you told me it was going to be variable, but you made it be the same thing. Like, I'm lost. Okay, so let me clarify. I gave you two different options. One was to hard code the lead source right here. On the web form, I could say, hey, popular science, done. Every time somebody fills out that form, it will be that one particular lead source. So this is great if I'm creating a single landing page to go along with a single advertisement. What I've had many people do, though, is create one landing page that works for many different advertisements. So if I wanted to do the same ad across many different magazines or otherwise, then I could send all of those different magazines, all of those different ads to the same landing page. Let me get rid of this, to the same landing page right here. Okay, same thing. However, I'm not going to hard code the lead source. I'm not going to type the lead source in like I've got it set up here. I'm going to get rid of it and hit save. And then I would have to go through and republish. Okay. What I'm doing there is I'm creating a field. I'm creating a container. I'm creating a space to tell Infusionsoft what the lead source is. But I'm not yet telling it what it is. Okay. But I've got a space. Okay. I've got this lead source field here. So now from one of my magazines, I'm going to send them to this URL, and I'm going to include this thing that says lead source ID. Okay, it's question mark lead source ID with capital L, S, and I. Lead source ID equals, and if it were my popular science advertisement, I would say lead source ID equals 27. If I was running it from a different magazine, it might be 29. If I was running it from another one, it might be 31. All of those end up showing the same web form, but the difference now is I'm telling Infusionsoft, hey, this came from a different lead source. It's not the popular science one, it's a different one. So now I'm telling Infusionsoft what it is. Does that help there, Farley? Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Trip. Trip was saying, how can you manually enter revenue so that it will show up in the ROI report? We don't use Infusionsoft e-commerce. If you do need that ROI report there, Trip, what you're going to want to do is manually create an order for the value of whatever your order was offline. You don't have to go through and line itemize everything. You just need to get the total dollar amount within there. So you could go into a contact record. Let me close this out. So if I pulled up a contact record for me, I could pull that up, go through, and I could add an order here. Add an order. Great. Ties all this information in here. Hit save. And then I could simply add whatever my order was. Add an order item. You may create a single order item. If you don't need reporting on products and otherwise within Infusionsoft, then great. You could just create a single order item in here that is, total payment. You'd have to create the product first, but then you can just specify the total dollar amount. And that'll get your sales numbers within there for you. Let's see. Victor. Victor said, For direct site visitors filling a web form, the lead source drop-down menu shows all kinds of URLs, and it's not friendly for prospects to self-select their lead sources. Victor, I would handle that one a little bit differently. You're correct. That I didn't even know that you could add a visible lead source field within there, and yeah, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. There you go. Okay, I guess you can. Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense because it shows them a whole bunch of lead sources within there. I would do something different there, Victor, and I would look at doing just a drop down that says, how did you hear about us? And then perhaps go in and assign that lead source at some future date. But as far as letting them self-select, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Bill said, if the lead source name is not a URL, does that mean it must be tallied with a URL parameter? Bill, are you talking about, let's take a look here. You're saying like tinyURL or Twitter or Facebook or Hootsuite, things like that? Is that what you're talking about, Bill? I think those ones, since they're common ones, I think there were 30 or 40 different ones that are fairly common. So what we did is I think we went in and just had those shift it to something that was easier to read. So instead of it saying www.facebook.com, it just says Facebook. So did I speak to your question there, Bill? I'm not sure if I fully understood it. Let me know if you need some clarification there. You're saying trade show. Oh, okay. So like this one down here, yeah, there are some that I created within here that were designed to be like offline type stuff. So that was one that I had manually created in there. Within here, what I have is a mix of things that were automatically created and manually created. Ones that can be, online stuff that is tracking or offline stuff. So that's where I had a few of these things. Trade show was one of them. Gotcha. Okay, Bill, gotcha. Okay, so he's saying if it was this trade show one, if I did want to ever identify this on a web form, then yes, that does require a URL parameter. Yes, or you hard code it precisely. If I were doing something like a trade show, I'd create a web form that I had people fill out that just hard coded that as a trade show lead source, or just mass apply that afterwards. Let's see. Bill was asking, Scott, if we added a lead source that was created by Infusionsoft Web Analytics, for example, mydomain.com, to something like mydomain-direct or similar, will all future traffic from mydomain.com have the updated one? Bill, it may. I've not tried that one. So I'm not 100% certain. I know Casey deals with that stuff quite a bit there. Casey, if you're still on the call here, maybe you got some insight into that one. I know you can go in and edit it, but I've not tested to see if that actually shifts the future ones. Casey, hey, he was just asking if you actually change the name of one of your lead sources in here that's an auto-generated one, like if I change growsocial.com here to just growsocial, or this one to just university, would that maintain in the future, or would it continue to be overridden? Have a new one created. The reason I asked Casey on this one is I know his tool will actually go through and fix all that stuff for you automatically. If you've got a few different lead sources that are being created, his tool will go in and update those for you automatically. So that sounds to me like that it may not maintain your change on that one. So I'll give Casey some time here to reply, Bill, and then we'll circle back around. Okay, Bill, Casey said a new lead source will be created. So if you modify it, it just next time one comes through, it will then recreate that old one that you had already modified. So what I've seen with Casey's tool there, Bill, if you're looking for something to help manage that in the future, Casey's tool will actually go through and update that for you and remerge all of those for you in the future. It'll just run on a job every night to update that stuff. So if that's an issue there for you, Casey or Bill, check that one out. Mark was pointing out something here. Mark said, hey, you may want to show the lead source trending report, which I didn't even get to here. Lead source trending report's pretty slick. It's one of our new trending tools that we're starting to put in. We're starting to build out more reporting tools for y'all. You're able to go through here and take a look at visitors, contacts, customers, and otherwise to start to compare things head to head. So if I want to start looking at my contacts from some different lead sources, I can go through and start to pull that information up here. And it will go through and compare those. I don't even know what's going to pull up here. Hey, there you go. These are on days when I do Infusionsoft University, send people to my site so I can see where those spikes are. I can do different time ranges and stuff. I think I can compare head-to-head up to 5 lead sources, and we can look at some different information, visitors, contacts, customers, or income. So if you want to start to see some visual cues on that stuff related to time, that's a great one to check out. Chris, and I think we clarified yours there. Chris had asked, when they come from an offline ad, will they need to enter a whole string of characters with the URL lead source into the URL bar? Yeah, they would, unless you find a smarter way to do that. And I would highly recommend that you do. Somehow you have to get this information. If you're hard coding it, somehow you got to get this information to us. If it were me, I'd do a QR code, or I'd do a bit.ly link, or I would do a redirect from my own domain. So if it were scottrichens.com/summer special, I would have that redirect or do whatever it needed to do to now end up with a URL like this. Nobody's ever going to type that in. So yeah, great point there, Chris. Way to see that one. Cheryl said she was asking about passing data from different sources. Her note here was only use unformatted HTML. Cheryl, to my knowledge, the HTML versions of the web forms do not do the auto population here. They do not pull in the information here from the URL and populate the form fields. So if you are passing information in the query string, you will want to use the JavaScript one. It is possible to do it with HTML. You just have to add additional coding to that. So if you don't know code at all, just use JavaScript if you're passing things in the query string. If you do know some code, great. You can use that for, you can use HTML ones. You just have to go in and add some additional PHP scripting or otherwise in order to pre-populate the information. Chase, thanks for the feedback. Dave, did I get your question there clarified? You were asking how do you populate multiple ones? I circled back around that a few minutes ago to show passing that information with just different information here in the query string. So that's how we populate multiple ones. You won't ever have multiple lead sources on the same contact record, but you can pass different lead sources to a form. Perfect. Let's see, what else we got here? Okay, Dave, I saw your follow-up here. You're saying, what if you want to put 4 different ones? Dave, you can only have 1 lead source there per contact record. So you wouldn't put 4 different ones simultaneously. But if I wanted to send people from different advertisements to the same landing page, I would, but I would just change this number here to reflect where they came from. Because if they're coming from offline, I don't know where that was when they hit my site directly. But I can know if I give them like a QR code that includes this lead source ID. It says, hey, by the way, this is where I came from. And it's telling Infusionsoft that information. Mark, thanks for the feedback. Chase was asking, can you do the same Ninja Code thing with a web form preceding an Infusionsoft squeeze page? Do you need it? If you are Chase, give me a little bit more detail there. Not quite sure what you're asking. Are you asking, you've got a page before you then send them to the next page where there's a web form? You're saying they fill out a form that's not an Infusionsoft form before they get to another page. We link a squeeze page to a web form. Yeah, you would need to find a way to pass that information across. If the Infusionsoft web form isn't the first thing that they hit with this information, then you would need to find a way to pass that across to the next page. Okay. The Infusionsoft web form is the second page. Yeah, you would need to find a way to then pass that across to the second page. Do you use WordPress, Chase? Yeah, check out something called URL params, because what you could then do is make your link to the next page, possibly just pass this information along in the URL string. You just update the URL you're actually sending people to. Let's see, Bill. Bill, I appreciate you going through and helping clarify your question. I think we got your question there answered, Bill. And Bill, thanks again for asking, for proposing this topic. Bill was the one that had proposed this topic originally. Danny, I think I got your question answered. Okay, perfect. I saw later on you were asking about Money Magazine or Forbes. You had said answered later on, so I'm going to assume that we got that one answered. Victor, great point out there. Victor saying Google pay-per-click ads won't allow me to mask my URL with a different domain. So instead of seeing my domain in the ads, it'll show the infusionsoft.com. Any ideas? Victor, with Google pay-per-click ads and Facebook ads, yeah, they do want to see those on your domain. So you're going to take the forms and you're going to place it there on your own domain. That is something that they go in, they double check anyway. So you'll want to make sure and do that if you're doing your pay-per-click advertising. If you're doing pay-per-click advertising and you're doing a bunch of that, I'm going to recommend that you check out Casey's tool, iTracker 360, or you check out Tyler Garn's script that he's got there, because those were built to really help out folks that are doing your online advertising. So that's going to be the best, easiest solution there for you, Victor, is to check out one of those tools. Chris said, when you redirect, what's a good practice? I'm not fully certain I understand there on what's a good practice on that one. Is if the question is whether or not you should redirect? Me personally, as much as possible, I'm going to keep things on my own domain, because I've got enough skills to be able to throw something up on my domain fairly quickly. That's not really time intensive for me. 4 years ago, totally different story. When I was an Infusionsoft user before I was working here, holy cow, create a new web form and putting it on my page and styling it to make it look right. Want to beat my head against the wall. So I chose to go develop some of the skills to do that. If it comes down to redirecting, that has more to do with the customer experience on that one, the prospect experience. If your branding looks really similar, people redirecting to another web page, not going to be a major issue on that one. But like Victor was mentioning earlier here, the Google pay-per-click ads and Facebook ads and otherwise, they want to see that on your own domain. That's actually going to help you out. So in that case, you would not want to redirect. Ramona, hey, good to see you here. Ramona was at our Infusionsoft University in Orlando a couple weeks ago. Yes, this is being recorded. I will post it up as soon as I can. I'm hoping this afternoon. It sometimes takes some extra time here to convert, so I'll work on getting this posted as soon as I can. Should be by tomorrow at the latest. Bill said, can we merge lead sources at all? We get leads from longandfoster.com and also from inf.com, which is the same thing. If you want to track those as the same thing. No, I don't believe, Bill, that currently there's a way to merge those. That's where Casey's tool came in. Again, if you're looking at iTracker 360, that was a need that he noticed that Infusionsoft doesn't quite fill yet. And so one of the things that it does, let me see if I know where it's at. It will go through, organize, and consolidate your lead sources for you. That is one of the premium paid parts of his software. But basically, you can go through and say, hey, all of these right here actually need to be, PPC Google in this case, or search engine or otherwise. And so that will go through and maintain all that for you, Bill. So that's something to check out. Jerry, where was lead source tracking again? Lead source tracking is underneath lead gen. Sorry, not lead source tracking, but trending. It's under lead gen and then lead source trending report. Farley, thanks for the feedback there. Let's see. Chase, awesome. I think we got you on your way. And then Chris, good. I think we're about done here. That's all the questions that I've got here for today. So looks like we'll wrap up here. I'll give it a few more seconds if there's a couple other questions coming in. Otherwise, we will call it good. Okay. Thank you very much for being here today. As always, if you have some more questions, you got some feedback, feel free to drop me an email. Also, jump onto our mastermind, mastermindwebinars.uservoice.com. Go ahead and check out different topics that have been suggested here. Vote for the ones that are of interest to you. Using LinkedIn to generate leads. I've got our resident social media expert here that runs all of our social media strategies at Infusionsoft. I've got her coming in to do that one in a couple weeks when I'm out of town here. So that one's coming down the pipe. If you got some other ones that you're interested in, feel free to go in, vote those ideas up, and that's how we choose a majority of the topics of what we cover here at the Mastermind Call. So again, thanks so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you guys at a future Mastermind webinar. Have a great day.